My name's Casey. I was previously an engineer at Google and then most recently an investment partner at Paradigm, and am now doing a lot of open source development and investing. And I want to talk today about decentralized AI, not because it's the hottest thing, or maybe partially because it's the hottest thing right now, and because I think it's very misunderstood. So let's dive in. Okay, so right now, AI is basically in the hands of two people. It's big tech and it's the government. And I think we should just look at how that's going so far. So on the big tech side, I don't know if everybody has been following what's happening with Gemini, but Gemini is the model from Google, which, you want to keep going? Okay. That?
Let's set up the slideshow.
Oh, okay.
And then you get the clicker.
But I have to get out of it to demo in a
It's okay.
second.
You hit escape.
Okay. Okay. All right, so this is Gemini, and basically over the last week, there's been a ton of stuff on the internet because Google was pretty hands-on with deciding what to show. And a lot of people are freaking out because it's rewriting history. And so this is a prompt where you're asking for medieval knights, and there's displaying women. I'm allowed to say this because I am a woman. And obviously, this can get really tricky, and it's a slippery slope because as we rely on AI as showing our history, if things are getting opinionated about what genders and what really happened, for example, I think you can all deduce where this goes. From this, a lot of people from Google, we actually had a meeting about it like 2 days ago with my old team, and a lot of people are starting to leave because of this, because they're so frustrated with the fact that they aren't keeping AI open and they feel like they aren't doing their duty as Google. And so then the CEO came out and basically said, like, we're sorry, we understand that it was a big problem, and they're gonna try to fix it. So, I mean, we don't know where this story goes, but at least right now, it seems like letting big tech rewrite history to fit what we think is normal or good today is probably not the best path to where AI is gonna go. And then on the government side, I think the scariest thing I've recently seen is this, which is a press release from the White House comparing RAG, which for people that are less technical stands for retrieval augmented generation, and then fine tuning. And the TLDR of like all you need to understand is that these are so different. It would be like comparing Ethereum to Bitcoin. And the fact that the government is just now, like 3 days ago, writing a press release about this is mind-boggling. And it just like really distills a lot of fear in me and my friends because it just shows kind of where they are on the learning curve. And so then the summary here is kind of like letting a group of people who barely understand the difference between ETH and BTC choose, for example, crypto regulation probably wouldn't be a good idea, and that's the same case with AI. So then it gets like with these two big players probably not doing the best job, it's really in our hands to make sure that AI stays open and it's dictated by us in the collective instead of these monopolies. So with that, it's how do we get there? Crypto and decentralized may play a role. I definitely am not the type of person to overpromise, and so I think it's likely crypto and decentralization are pivotal parts of this, but it's not proven yet. This is a really nascent category, and we're still figuring out what's gonna work and what's not gonna work. I recently wrote a blog post on kind of what I'm seeing and what the categories are within the space, and I'm gonna walk through a few today, and then I'll demo live as we go and try to keep it actually, can you just raise your hand if you're technical, just so I know like how technical to go? Okay, that's actually like majority. All right, so the number one category people come to me about or send me decks about is decentralized compute. And so the way we're gonna walk through categories is I'm gonna tell you the pro, I'll tell you the con, and then I'll augment it with what I actually think, because recently people gave me the feedback that I wasn't opinionated enough in this blog. So I wanna show people kind of where I actually stand on these things. So for decentralized compute, the thesis is, why don't we just build Airbnb for computers? And specifically, GPUs, because we have this global shortage, and why not aggregate them? Makes sense logically. On the counter argument, people think, well, our consumer hardware isn't really strong enough, and also they're not co-located, and if you know anything about computers, if they're not co-located, you're gonna have a lag in latency, and so it's probably not gonna actually be performant. And so where I sit on this is I actually think it is gonna work. I think for certain use cases, we will have an Airbnb for compute, but where it keeps me up at night is actually if it's gonna be a crypto-first approach. I think this is like the elephant in the room that nobody talks about, is that centralized providers for GPUs like Vast AI, RunPod, they also have crowdsourced P2P solutions, and they're getting a ton of traction. And so I think the crypto community should be aware that centralized providers are also kind of going in this direction. And I'm interested to see if people like Akash or Jensen win, but they really are going against these like more, not reputable, but more known and more adopted solutions. All right, so with that said, I actually use Akash every day. I'm a huge provider on it. I'm also a huge consumer of it. And I think it might be interesting to walk through how to set up a server there. Would that be interesting? Yeah? Okay, so let me get out of this and do this. So, okay, so if you, basically like anytime you want to set up a server and you need shell access, so you need to like get into the machine, usually you go to AWS, but now you have this decentralized alternative Akash. There's also like a lot of other providers, but the reason I love Akash is because it's live today, and a lot of the people that I talk to are like building for 2025, 2026, but I just want to build today. So this is a front end that you can go to called CloudMoss. It's actually a community project. I also am not an investor in Akash, so there's no like incentive here. But you go here, and this is like where you can start a deployment. These are like the 2 servers I'm running right now, but we can deploy a new one. And so what you do is you upload an SDL, which is basically like a file that describes what compute requirements you need. And there's a lot of these like templates, so even if you aren't that technical, you can just DM me and I can send you the good SDLs. And then you create a deployment and you lock up some AKT. I think I'm logged into my wallet, yeah, okay. And then what this now does is basically broadspans to the network and asks who can provide the compute. And then this will show a list of providers, which are people like me who are giving their compute to the network. And so you can come in and you can select one. We're working on kind of the UI here. I think like other things should be shown because I want to just contribute as an open source dev. But this is what it looks like today. You basically would see if it's audited or not, and then you would select their bid. And then now we have an Akash instance that's being deployed. It's that easy. And then once it's deployed, I will show you kind of how to tap into it. So yeah, so then right now it's getting spun up, but then you have shell access as well as CLI access that you can go in and basically do anything you do on AWS or GCP. My like STL that I uploaded featured something called Ollama, which is a way that you can run models locally. And so you can basically, let me show if it's already deployed. Yeah, okay, so this is like the HTTP endpoint of Ollama is running. That means that like you could just hit into this at any point. You can also like just to actually finish the demo, and hopefully this works, you can come over here and like this is Ollama. You could type this in, and what this will do now is like on the server that is distributed, it will pull the manifest of the model Llama 2. It's a quantized version, which means it's like small and can fit on this machine. And this will take like a minute. So while this goes on, we'll keep going, and I'll actually tell you about Ollama because I'm realizing Ollama should have come first. So yeah, let's jump here to talk about Ollama. So right now, another really underrated thing is edge compute. I think that a lot of people are thinking about like distributed inference, and what people don't understand is that we can actually do a lot on the hardware. And so the concrete numbers to be aware of that I think often are missed when explaining this is like Llama 2, which is like the largest open source model today from Meta. They, according to NVIDIA, recommend that you have 30 gigabytes of VRAM, which is a type of memory on your computer, which is pretty crazy. Like some people have it, but some people don't. Then Ollama came out, which basically takes the models and makes them a lot smaller for us. And so with Ollama, you actually only need 8 gigabytes of RAM to run all these like 7B parameter models, which is crazy. And the coolest thing is that the cheapest MacBook today comes with 8 gigabytes of RAM. And what this means is that if you have an Apple computer, every single person in this room, if you have one, you have no excuse to be running models that aren't locally hosted because you have the memory requirements that you need. And so if anybody is up for it and just wants to do it now, because I think it's like an amazing step towards owning your data and just like being integrated in decentralized AI, you can go to olama.com. And then from there, you just need to run Olama, what we just ran on the machine in Akash, and then you will have access to a totally private, uncensored, non-safetyist model that you can do whatever you'd like with. Okay, so let's go back to Akash just to finish this. Okay, great. So it pulled the manifest. It would be doing exactly what you're doing locally, and then you can say, like, what is an NPC? And it will respond with this, and this is like totally local, and you have no problem with anybody censoring you. Okay, so that is Olama, and that is Akash. And then the next category that I spend a lot of time thinking about is data and how data ownership might change. So the thesis here is that data has become the most valuable resource in the world, and yet it's not financialized by anyone. Well, it's financialized by one person, big tech, not by the users though. And so there's a case here that maybe with AI, we finally take ownership of this really valuable digital resource. On the contrary, a lot of people think, oh, well, not enough people care about privacy, so they're not going to do it anyways. And we've been shown that time and time again around history that people just prefer convenience over privacy. My personal opinion, I obviously think it's going to work. I think that AI is the kind of shift in the Overton window where people are going to start realizing, oh, wait, no, I really do want my data, and this is really powerful. Who knows what will end up happening? That's what I think. And so what keeps me up at night here is actually like, how do we incentivize people to start caring about their data? And basically, could we vampire attack ChatGPT if we all came together and took our data somewhere else? So that's a little side project I'm working on. Okay, and then, next one, token incentivized apps. So this idea is that tokens and incentivizing behavior through monetary rewards is one of the killer use cases of crypto. Let's just be blunt. And so a lot of people are thinking, all right, well, why don't we take that, and then why don't we incentivize ML behavior? And so this is actually where I put BitTensor, which is probably the most well-known project in the space. This is also where I put something like MyShell, which is trying to vampire attack character AI. And then actually, just to follow the format, the anti-case is obviously like, this is just speculative behavior. Nobody should be promoting this, and this is like the worst part of crypto. I think that BitTensor is one of the most poorly understood projects in the space, and so I did want to do like a quick deep dive on it, just so everybody in the audience is aware of what it actually is. Disclaimer, I am like a pretty big miner of Subnet 1. Actually, not really anymore because it got a lot more competitive, but I was. And so the way BitTensor works is basically, for Subnet 1, there's two big actors. There's validators and there's miners, people like me. And so a validator, in the future, will be real users. But right now, it's mainly validators, which will send a question to a miner and say, like, what is an NPC? And then I have two types of machines running. I have, like, EC2 instances or just, like, really cheap servers running GPT. And then I also have really beefy GPUs, like H100s, A100s, that are running open source models like Zephyr. And then those basically create a response just like we did in Akash, like literally just like we did. We would generate a response, and then we'd send it back to the validator. This is, again, like a very distilled version of just one thing BitTensor does on Subnet 1. So this is not like the whole picture, but just to get like really concrete about one thing. And so from there, basically, like one of my two machines would generate a response. I would send that to the validator, and then the validator would compare all of the answers, and they compare it against something called a validating set, which is built by running an open source model. Right now, the default is Zephyr 7B, but you can change that if you want. And then they pick the one that's closest, and then you get rewarded in Tau if you have the answer that's closest. And so this is like, again, very high level, but basically what happened over the last month with BitTensor is there was like a huge arb, and anybody that had free credits at OpenAI could just host GPT-4 or 3.5, and it was pretty good, but then somebody kind of won because they fine-tuned a model on the validating set, and then they got all the rewards. And now, BitTensor is awesome, and they're fixing things, so it's better. But that's the juice of the BitTensor community right now, is like how some subnets are basically gameable, and that makes it less fun for everybody. And then kind of just to zoom out on BitTensor before we move on, the big picture here would be could we make models actually better? Like, could we use this general framework to progress LLMs in a lot more other stuff, different subnets, but could we get better than open source? I think, I don't want to be a bear on this, but I think, to be blunt, the problem that I find with BitTensor right now is like the ceiling is the validating set, if that makes sense. Like we're all submitting to the validating set, and the validating set can only be as good as what is available for them. And so making BitTensor better than open source, I hope we can get there through a variety of different improvements that are in the, I guess, like in progress. But right now, to me, it doesn't. And so hopefully that makes sense at a high level, but it's still early days for them. Okay, and then we'll do two more deep dives, and then I'll wrap up. Okay, AGI Guild. Anybody that's thinking about like how to monetize open source, this is also a new project that a few of us are contributing to. The idea here is that Bitcoin did something really beautiful, and it lets devs work for Bitcoin without having a job. It's fucking awesome. Like a lot of my friends are just BTC core devs, and it's amazing for the community. And the problem with open source right now is that all these open source devs for AI end up joining Meta. Like my old Google manager now works at Meta because they have the most data, they have the most compute, and like Mark will pay him. And so what if we could create a structure where they don't have to work for Mark and instead they can work for themselves? I think that would be really sick. And so that's what we're working on there is like, could we create a token that basically rewards open source devs so they can just do AI work and they don't have to work at Meta? And if you're interested in that, come find me later. And then the last kind of big project that I work a lot with that's in this kind of like token incentivized behavior category is Morpheus. We're also very early days on this, but it's like David Johnston's new project, and it's trying to be kind of this like coordination layer between all AI projects. And you can just go to more.org if you're interested in learning more there. But what we're building is, I can show you guys actually really quickly. So, okay, there's like a secret route, more.org/chat. If you're interested in the password, you can find me later. But basically, this is what I'm helping build, which is like an open source ChatGPT that is uncensored and hosted. So if you don't want to do Olama or you're running on a phone and you don't have the memory requirements to do local, we're doing this so you can always have access to a ChatGPT that isn't censoring you. So that's like the side project there. Okay, one more slide. So the last category, yep, on-chain verifiability, ZKML stuff. This is, we're really early here. The thesis here is basically like as AI models become integrated on chain, we're gonna need a way to verify what models were run. And so if you play the tape forward, imagine a doctor giving you a diagnosis and you're gonna wanna know, well, what actually went into that model? I think it makes sense. I think the con or the antithesis is basically like that there's so much venture money in crypto right now, or there was, and it all flew into ZKML because we love technical things, and it could just be the result of being too much hype and too much VC money, and maybe it's like a solution looking for a problem. My opinion here is I do think it will work. The question is when, and is it the right time now? Because we're so early in this whole evolution that it might be more of like something that happens in 2025, 2026. But there's amazing players working in this category too, like Modulus Labs, and Upshot is also creating a new product that does a lot of this. Okay, I think that's basically it. I'll open for questions for like 2 questions, and then we can wrap up, and I can show or demo anything else too if anyone's interested. Questions, anyone? Okay. Oh.
You mentioned about the sort of capacity limit or an issue with the tensor. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, can you just talk a little bit louder?
Oh, you said there was like a limitation with the tensor. Can you explain the dynamic?
Yeah. Okay, so this is, first of all, just for subnet 1, and so there's like, whatever, I think there's 32 subnets, but don't quote me on that, I think so. But for subnet 1, this has also changed over the last month. You can do a lot more now, but when I was mining on subnet 1, the main thing I was doing is something called Q&A, and what it is like, yeah, a validator gives you, or a user, in theory, gives you a question, and then you create an answer and you return it. Okay, and so the way you choose who wins in the system is how close is my answer to something called a validating answer or the validating set. The validating set is generated independent of minors. And so that's kind of like their deity. It's like their source of truth. They're the ceiling of what we're all trying to match towards. And so that's the problem, is that you can only be as good as the validating set. In fact, we're all, at least I was like overfitting to fit the validating set to get the reward. Does that make sense? And so when we're saying, oh, it can push it forward, I hope we can get there. But right now, with the validating set being the source of truth, that's the constraint.
Yeah, it's kind of like what's happening with Funny Page, where everyone's like playing to the questions.
Exactly. And so like these are the problems that you have with any token incentivized system, is you have to really think about the game theory here and like what are the actors incentivized to do? And we're just gonna, we're gonna fine tune on the validating set and then submit. And so we need to adjust the mechanism design basically to be better. Yeah.
Can you talk about use cases where it very clearly doesn't make sense to combine crypto and AI?
Oh yeah, I mean anything that you need latency, anything that you need the computers to be co-located does not make any sense. So like high frequency trading, I think somebody asked me yesterday if that was a good use case, and I was like, exactly the opposite, because you need the computers to be connected by a band basically, and that's where you're going to get the most performance. And so that's also the biggest paradox of this whole thing, is anybody that grew up in computing, it's like, wait, no, computers are supposed to be together. That's the whole point. And so to think through, there's a lot of use cases actually where I would never apply this, but specifically to answer your question, anything where I think accuracy, latency, and false positives are really tricky, I would not fool around with it. That's why I still use a lot of centralized hardware myself. Yeah.
How about storage?
I never really got into the storage sector. I don't know enough about Arweave and IPFS, honestly, to comment on it. I think at a high level, it would make sense for certain types of storage that you only need to retrieve at certain times. But again, I think that it would really come down to the use case. Yeah. I think there was one more question. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. Where to start if you're technical, and besides Olam or in addition, or? Yeah. I mean, I can just show you. So, oh yeah, this is also, wait, let's see if this runs. This might not run. It might. Okay, it is running, great. Okay, so this is just me curling the, one of my Akash instances, but for Olama, basically you would just download Olama, and then you would run something like Olama run Llama 2 uncensored, and then it's all stored on your computer, and then in a second it will spin up, and then you can ask whatever, and that's how you use it. You use it in the terminal. If you don't want to use the terminal because, well, there's a lot of cons, like you don't get to save your chat history and whatever, I use something called LM Studio. So this is another place to start. The good thing with, actually, wait, I don't want anyone to see my queries, but but the good thing with that one is it's a really nice UI that you can use and kind of share with your friends and stuff. A lot of my friends will share that. But if you're open to using an API and developing your own thing, I just think Olam is amazing. And the reason is because I just think they're at the absolute cutting edge of quantized models, which I don't think people are using enough. I don't think the accuracy, all the latest research shows that quantized models, you get kind of it's like 80-20 on steroids rule, where you're getting the most accuracy with not having the memory constraints. And that's why, to me, is even distributed inference. I mean, there's a project called Ritual, which is amazing, but they're starting with inference, and I'm curious to see how that pans out, because I don't know if we're going to need distributed inference, because we might just, for a lot of use cases, be doing inference locally. Does that make sense? I still think, I think Ritual is an amazing, and I think they're going in an incredible direction, but I think for B2C, I think a lot more local inference will be used. Okay, cool. Thanks, everyone.
チャープリミティブ